When Trump opens his mouth, the world holds its breath. It's no exaggeration. It's a reflection of a time when a single sentence can send stock markets plummeting, armies moving, and borders burning. His recent demand for a ceasefire, accompanied by the warning "act fast or face obliteration," sounded less like a request and more like a verdict. Some call him crazy, others a visionary. But the fact is, like him or not, no one can ignore him. And that, in itself, is power. We live in an age where speech is as lethal as missiles. Words have gone from being instruments of persuasion to strategic weapons, and Trump dominates this field like few others. He doesn't just speak to world leaders. He speaks to the collective unconscious. By demanding haste, he instills fear. By using the word obliteration, he activates the most primal human instinct, to survive. The game isn't just political, it's psychological, and few know how to play it as well as he does. But what's really behind this demand? Is it merely a political maneuver, a power struggle, or is there something deeper going on? Something that could redefine how the world understands leadership and obedience. To understand this, we must go beyond the headlines. We must delve into the mind, the ego, and the hidden intentions that drive the global game. And that's precisely where this analysis begins. The scene is almost cinematic. Cameras trained, microphones attentive, and millions of eyes fixed on a single man. On the other side of the world, generals interrupt meetings, analysts try to predict movements, and ordinary citizens wonder if what they've heard is just rhetoric or the harbinger of something bigger. There's something unsettling about the way Trump speaks. His voice doesn't just communicate, it commands. There's a rhythm, an intonation, and a confidence that sound less like diplomacy and more like decree. But the true impact isn't in the words themselves, it's in what they provoke. Each sentence feels like a domino falling over the global balance. Investors pull back, stock markets fluctuate, alliances shake. It's the power of unpredictability. While traditional politicians worry about appearing moderate, Trump thrives on the tension he creates. He knows that fear moves faster than reason, and that in times of chaos, those who appear most confident in their speech gain control of the narrative. And there's something almost symbolic about this historic moment. The world seems tired of diplomatic promises and agreements that fall apart at the first sign of contradiction. People want action, even if that action comes disguised as a threat. Trump, in a way, embodies this spirit. That of the leader who doesn't ask permission to act, who breaks protocols and speaks what many only think in silence. Perhaps that's why he arouses both fascination and repulsion. Deep down, his figure isn't just political. It's the raw reflection of a humanity that still believes power is won through the power of voice. And this is where the real question arises. What do these words mean for a world trying to balance power and peace? To what extent can rhetoric shape the fate of nations? And how long will fear remain the most effective language of modern geopolitics? The burning scene. The trigger that led to Trump's demand. The world watched in tense silence as the fuse was lit. Regional conflicts, which once seemed distant, began to draw a dangerous line between diplomacy and destruction. Troops moved, economies trembled, and daily headlines seemed to repeat a single cry: chaos. In this context, Trump saw an opening, not just political but historical, to regain prominence on the world stage. He recognized the void of authority and decided to fill it with the voice many love and others fear. While leaders opted for cautious statements, Trump chose the opposite path: direct confrontation. He knew that in times of uncertainty, those who speak firmly dictate the pace of events. It wasn't just a political gesture. It was a strategic move, designed to rekindle the image of a man who isn't afraid to say what the world avoids thinking. And, curiously, this direct, sometimes blunt, style has a powerful effect. It forces others to take a stand. But what few realized was that the timing of his speech was not random. Military insiders indicated rising tensions, and confidential information pointed to an imminent escalation. Trump, in demanding an immediate ceasefire, wasn't just speaking to those involved, he was speaking to the entire planet. And while some saw him as a provocateur, others saw him as the only one capable of preventing a catastrophe. From that point on, the speech that would change the tone of diplomatic conversations would begin. The speech that shook the diplomatic backstage when Trump took the podium, the world held its breath. The silence that precedes a storm descended, and then came the words that crossed borders in seconds. His tone was sharp, almost military, and each sentence seemed charged with gunpowder. No euphemisms, no softening. "Act quickly," he said, with that confidence that blends audacity and calculation. It was more than a request, it was an ultimatum. Behind the scenes, ambassadors exchanged glances, ministers interrupted meetings, and analysts tried to decipher the true meaning of those words. The speech wasn't just about war. It was about power, influence, and redefining who sets the rules on the global stage. Trump used his rhetoric like a scalpel, cutting through the diplomatic surface to expose the open wound of international hypocrisy. He knew the effect he would have, and that's exactly what he sought. As the audience was divided between applause and outrage, the corridors of power were buzzing. No one wanted to be the first to react, but everyone knew that ignoring it would be tantamount to bowing down. It was a speech that played on egos and agendas, arousing both fear and respect. And at the center of it all remained a simple, ominous message. Time is running out. This idea would be the foundation of the next move, the urgent warning that would follow. Act fast. The urgent warning and the political game behind the phrase act fast may sound like simple advice, but in Trump's geopolitical vocabulary it's code. He understands the power of time and how the clock, when used strategically, becomes a silent weapon. Urgency breeds panic. Panic breeds hasty decisions, and hasty decisions almost always favor those who set the pace. Trump knows how to play this game. By saying act fast, he's not just demanding action, he's assuming the role of the one who sets the global pace. Urgency, in this context, is a test of power. Countries that respond quickly demonstrate fear or dependence. Those that hesitate challenge their authority. It's a subtle, almost psychological game, in which every move reveals intentions. Leaders who understand this chess game act cautiously, knowing that the first to react isn't always the one who wins. It's like a game of political poker. Showing too much nervousness can be costly, but appearing indifferent is also a calculated risk. Trump uses time like a military strategist uses terrain. He creates pressure to gauge loyalty and uses chaos as a tool to reorganize forces. When he says act fast, he's not just talking about tanks and missiles. He's talking about influence, about who has the courage to act before collapse sets in. The whole world understood there was more to that phrase than a warning. There was a veiled warning, and that warning would gain weight when he mentioned the word no leader wants to hear. Obliteration. The fear of obliteration. The power of words in modern geopolitics. When Trump used the term obliteration, the air seemed to shift. The word wasn't common in political discourse. It was raw, devastating, almost apocalyptic. And that's precisely what made it effective. It awakened in the collective unconscious memories of bombs, ruins, and stories the world swore never to repeat. Thoughtful leaders know that certain words don't just communicate ideas. They ignite emotions, and emotions move entire nations. In modern geopolitics, words are long-range weapons. A simple tweet can trigger market panic, deploy troops, or topple governments. Trump understands this power like few others. He doesn't speak to please. He speaks to provoke reactions. His every sentence is a test, a bait thrown to measure how well others can withstand the impact. By mentioning obliteration, he wasn't directly threatening. He was hinting at the unspeakable. And sometimes, fear of what might happen is more effective than the event itself. This type of communication is what separates a traditional politician from a verbal warfare strategist. Trump uses symbolic terror as a tool of deterrence, much like great powers use missiles for display. He knows that fear is universal, and when fear speaks louder, reason falls silent. The stunned world began a chain reaction, and previously silent alliances began to move. It was a harbinger of what was to come. Global repercussions that would transform the global landscape. that would transform the global landscape. Global repercussions. Allies, rivals, and the global board in motion. The echo of Trump's words spread faster than any diplomat could contain. Within hours, embassies were activated, generals called emergency meetings, and intelligence agencies began recalculating risks. In Europe, leaders were torn between discomfort and dependence. Criticizing Trump meant challenging a still dominant power. Supporting him, on the other hand, was an act of submission. This ambiguity exposed how much the modern world still lives in the shadow of American decisions. On the other side of the globe, historic rivals saw the tension as an opportunity. Countries that had been waiting for years for the West to slip up began to move in the shadows, reinforcing discreet alliances and pacts that would never be publicly acknowledged. While the spotlight was on the statements, the real game was taking place off-camera, in energy agreements, information exchanges, and loans that bought silent loyalties. It was like watching a chess match where every move cost billions and shaped destinies. Stock markets fluctuated, oil prices rose, and the media fueled fear with increasingly alarmist headlines. The streets, even far from the war, felt the impact: inflation, insecurity, and uncertainty. The civilian world, once again, paid the price for decisions made in closed rooms. And while everyone watched the visible consequences, few asked what was really being played out behind the scenes. That answer would begin to emerge in the next chapter: the hidden game that drives global politics. The first major reaction came from I'll Take, who called an extraordinary meeting. France and Germany advocated diplomatic avenues, while the United Kingdom maintained firm rhetoric alongside the United States. Behind the scenes, however, unease was evident. Some allies began to question the extent to which they would blindly follow orders from Washington. After all, Trump has always had a knack for dividing even those who, theoretically, are on the same side. Europe, still weakened by internal crises, found itself forced to choose between pragmatism and loyalty. China, in turn, reacted subtly but calculatedly. The government in Beijing issued a statement calling for global restraint, while discreetly increasing naval traffic in strategic areas of the Indo-Pacific. It was a silent but symbolic response, a show of force without having to fire a single shot. The same was true for Russia, which, even under sanctions, seized the moment to reposition itself as a mediator between the powers, a bold move reminiscent of Soviet-era diplomatic style. Putin knows that in times of tension, those who offer dialogue gain prominence. Meanwhile, in the High-M, the atmosphere was one of tension and disbelief. The Security Council was divided between formal speeches and veiled accusations. No consensus, only more uncertainty. The word obliteration had crossed the planet and now echoed in the marble corridors of the institution that, ironically, was created to prevent war. And while leaders spoke about peace, arms contracts were signed in silence. All of this left a question hanging in the air. What, after all, is at stake when the whole world moves at once? The hidden game. What's really at stake? Behind the scenes, while the world's eyes were fixed on public statements and war maps, the real battles were taking place on another front, the economic one. Behind every modern conflict lies a silent struggle for resources, influence, and narratives. Oil, which once defined empires, now shares the spotlight with natural gas. Semiconductors and digital data. Today's war is not just territorial, it is technological and symbolic. Controlling energy and information is controlling the future. Companies, banks, and multinational conglomerates play a role as decisive as armies. Technology corporations, such as the giants that dominate artificial intelligence and communications, no longer answer only to governments. They often shape their decisions. This is why certain economic meetings hold more power than any UN summit. Trump knows this. He speaks not just to nations, but to the billionaires, CEOs, and investors who decide, in seconds, the fate of entire continents with a click. Behind the scenes, there is also competition. The hegemony of routes, energy corridors, supply lines, and influence in the Middle East and Central Asia. Russia seeks to secure control of land passages. China invests in ports and infrastructure through the Belt and Road Initiative. The United States seeks to preserve the financial and military dominance that still underpins the dollar as the global currency. The conflict, therefore, is not merely political. It is a race for the throne of invisible power. And as these gears shift, the world begins to feel the impact of a ripple effect that is far from over. The domino effect, how one sentence can redraw the world map history, has shown that bombs don't always change the course of humanity. Sometimes, it's just a single sentence. Trump's "act fast" echoed like a slap in the face, shaking the global system from its illusion of stability. Markets reacted, alliances reconfigured, and statements previously considered unthinkable returned to the table. Global politics is sensitive to fear, and fear is the most efficient fuel when it comes to moving nations. A single statement was enough to alter the pace of negotiations and reshape decades-old geostrategic plans. Governments began reinforcing borders, investors shifted to safe haven assets, and the energy sector went on red alert. Smaller countries, fearing being swept away by the current, sought new protectors, some by moving closer to China, others by re-establishing ties with the U.S. The political map began to reorganize itself almost organically, like dominoes falling in sequence, and each toppled piece revealed something larger: the vulnerability of the structures created to maintain peace. But perhaps the most profound impact was psychological. Humanity, which for decades had grown accustomed to the idea of distant war, was forced to confront the fragility of its own civilization. Social media amplified panic, and propaganda became a weapon as powerful as any missile. In the end, it became clear that the true battlefield was not just geographic, but mental. And it is precisely at this point that humanity's oldest dilemma arises, the one that combines power, ego, and control. Humanity's dilemma: power, ego, and the quest for control. At the heart of every war, every decision, and every world-shaking phrase lies something much older than politics: the human ego. History proves that empires don't fall simply from a lack of resources, but from excessive pride. Leaders rise up believing they are the chosen ones to save the world, but almost always end up trapped by their own ambitions. Power is seductive. It promises control, but demands the soul in return. And those who don't understand this end up confusing leadership with domination. Trump, like many before him, is the reflection of a humanity still struggling with its own mirror. His discourse is not merely political, it is symbolic. It awakens the most instinctive feelings in the masses: fear, idolatry, and resistance. And that is precisely why he evokes both love and hate. Every leader who understands the collective unconscious knows that governing is, in part, manipulating, not through force, but through narrative. History shows that whoever controls fear controls the world. But humanity's true challenge is not to dominate others. It's to dominate itself. As long as ego drives decision-making, the planet will remain trapped in this cycle of threat and response, power and downfall. The quest for external control is merely a reflection of internal disorder. When a leader cries for obedience, he reveals deep down his own desperation for security. And this is where politics meets philosophy. The war outside exists only because we have not yet won the war within ourselves. Great leaders have always walked the fine line between glory and ruin. Alexander the Great conquered half the known world before he was 30, but died without heirs and surrounded by distrust. Caesar, he was revered as a living god, but he was stabbed to death by those he trusted most. Napoleon, a military genius, ended up exiled and alone. They all had something in common. They confused power with eternity. The ego, when fed by victory, begins to demand adoration. And it is at this point that man loses his balance and becomes a prisoner of his own ambition. On the other hand, there are leaders who have proven that strength can coexist with humility. Mandela, for example, understood that forgiveness can disarm more than any army. Churchill, even in the midst of chaos, used words instead of tanks to keep the hope of an entire nation alive. And Lincoln, by fighting for abolition, showed that true power lies in upholding principles when the whole world screams otherwise. They are the exception that proves the rule. Power, when guided by conscience, can build civilizations, but when guided by ego, it destroys even the victors. Perhaps what the world is witnessing today is not just a political clash, but a collective mirror. Trump is just one piece in a game that reveals the human essence, the eternal struggle between control and compassion, between fear and wisdom. As long as humanity seeks leaders who reflect their instincts rather than their conscience, it will continue to repeat the same cycles under new names. In the end, the true revolution does not happen on the podiums, but within each human being who decides to replace pride with lucidity. And it is from this individual choice that the future will be born, or a repetition of chaos. Or a repetition of chaos. The world moves by decisions, but also by interpretations. And in the end, what separates those who merely observe from those who prosper is the ability to read beyond appearances, a leader's speech, a market's movement, a nation's silence. Everything carries signals. And those who learn to see these signals before others not only survive, anticipates the future. The question is, do you want to continue being a spectator or start playing on the same board as the decision makers? Most people get lost in the headlines, the controversies, and the social media. Few stop to understand what's behind it. The codes, the interests, the opportunities hidden in the chaos. That's what our training delves into, how to decipher the power, influence, and strategy behind every global movement, and apply these principles to personal, financial, and mental growth. It's not about politics, it's about perception. And whoever masters perception, masters the game. If you feel ready to take that next step, to stop just reacting and start acting strategically, then now is the time. Click the pinned link, access the full content, and immerse yourself in a new way of understanding the world and positioning yourself within it. This is no ordinary course. It's a mind map of power, vision, and strategy. The kind of knowledge that turns observers into protagonists. And before you leave, take advantage. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share this video with someone who needs to wake up to what's happening in the world. Because power, in the end, always belongs to those who are awake.